Hello and welcome to the home of collaboration with me, Gunther Ableton Franz Hans. And today we are going to be showing you the best DAW in the world.
What's up, my guy?
Sorry, but who are you?
The name's Braden, but my friends call me Logic Bro Follow. You can call me Brad.
And what you doing here?
I heard Boombox is doing a video on which DAW is best.
Well, the answer is clear and simple.
Alexa, play Eye of the Tiger.
Hello and welcome to Boombox with me, your host Fabio from Noise London. Today I'm going to be showing you the ultimate showdown between Ableton and Logic, two of the most popular DAWs on the market. Okay, let's start with workspaces. So here in Logic we have the arrangement view, okay? So this is where you can really easily create MIDI patterns, or you can drag and drop audio, or you can record audio. On the left-hand panel we have what's called the inspector. Now this correlates to each individual channel, and the inspector provides us with a bunch of options, such as we can change our instruments to maybe a synth, or if we have an audio channel we can change our input depending on what's plugged in, i.e. audio interface wise, microphones, guitars, synths. And then we also have a range of effects, so we can open EQs, compressors very quickly, and access to everything else that's on our computer. Now in Ableton we can see a very similar thing, except for the channels are actually on the right hand side. Here we have access to volume, panning, all those other functions that Logic have. We also have this browser which is always open, and this browser allows us to access, again, effects. We can also access different instruments and load them onto the channels. So very similar, except for the panels on the left and right are switched around, and if you come back to Logic for a second you'll see that the media panel is over here to the right. One of my favorite things about Ableton is the clip session view. So I've just hit tab there on my keyboard. Now this allows you to drag and drop in loops, MIDI, audio, you can even record straight into this. And then from there, what you can do is play the parts in an arrangement format. So what I mean is we can start building a song without actually having to add it to the arrangement view. And then I can audition them to see how my song is developing. So you can really quickly change between scenes and different groups of audio or MIDI information. Now Logic did try and copy this some years later, and they call this live loop grids. And it kind of works in the same way. You see, if I press play, I can play different loops and they kind of synchronize with the BPM. Again, you can audition the different parts that you've put together in a very, very similar way. Although I don't feel like the layout is as nice as the one in Ableton, but maybe that's just because I'm used to it. Now, Ableton does openly host all its effects in this bottom panel. So I can load up, auto filter, channel EQ, EQ8, and with the native effects, I can access them directly without having to open a separate window. However, it doesn't have a mixer view. In Logic, if I go to this button up here, or I press X on my keypad, I have a mixer that looks a little more traditional. And then from here, I can see all the effects on the individual channels. So to tally that up, the things I prefer about Ableton on the workspace front are for sure the clip view and how you can quickly access and change parameters within the stock plugins without having to open any separate windows. With Logic, I feel generally there's a little bit more space, and that mixer view is really important to me, especially when I'm doing mixing and mastering. In terms of functionality, Ableton has something that Logic doesn't, which really speeds up workflow, which I think is one of the most important things. So if you hit Command and F, you can immediately search any plugin. So let's say I want the sound shifter. I can then go down with my D-pad, hit enter, and boom, it loads it up. That for me just makes such a difference. And you can create groups within groups, a sort of group inception, if you like.
How complex is the idea?
Now, Logic, you do also have the ability to create folder stacks or summing stacks, which is essentially grouping, but you can't then create a group within a group, which is something they should probably add. However, a function that I really like that Ableton doesn't have is that you can select a bunch of regions and then do functions, name region cells by track name, or name the track name by the region cell. So you can really quickly organize the naming of the files to what you want. Something that I find a little frustrating with Ableton is that their record function is FN and then F9. which is a little annoying because sometimes you don't have both hands available in recording sessions and you just want to press something like R to start your recording. I know I'm nitpicking here, but these kind of things make a difference. Now, both Ableton and Logic do come with amazing audio engines, and what I mean by that is they do have the ability to flex the time in audio. In Ableton, if you select a clip and warp is on, you can actually directly warp the clip or the timing of the clip. So if I hold Shift when I've got the bracket tool open, I can very quickly stretch this out or make it shorter. You also have the ability to create transient markers and shift the audio as you please. But the audio feature that I really like is when you go from complex to beats, and then what you can do is reduce the sustain of a piece of audio. Now in Logic you have very similar functions. You can hover over the audio region, wait until the bracket comes up, hit Option, and then flex it, make it longer or shorter, just like in Ableton. There are also some awesome different flex time options, including Tempophone, which has this very unique characteristic. But where Logic really comes in clutch is the fact that it has an option for flex pitch, which is essentially like Melodyne. And this is particularly useful when you need to retune things like vocals.
Pero qué linda te ves soltera.
Ableton definitely has the upper hand here with being able to reduce the sustain of the transients, but this flex pitch tool in Logic is incredibly useful if you're having to retune a lot of audio.
So you're halfway through this video and you're looking at Fabio's studio and you're thinking to yourself, my God, I wish I had some of this equipment. Well, you also have the chance to win $500 as a giveaway card that you can spend on any studio equipment that you like. So make sure to go to the link in the description below. This has been Gunther Ableton von Franz Hans. Back to Fabio in the studio.
Recording in Ableton or Logic in audio or MIDI is very easy. You can just hit record, it will count you in, and you're ready to go. From there, you can then open your window and you can edit your MIDIs. You can select it all, you can quantize with Command U, and you're good to go. Now the MIDI roll or piano editor in Ableton is pretty awesome. You can highlight all your MIDI, and they do have this fantastic button called Legato. Ableton has a feature called Groove Pool, which allows you to quantize the MIDI in a slightly more shuffled way. So the Groove Pool is up here. We can choose a groove that we like. Bring it into the Groove Pool, and then we have access from it down here in this panel. So let's do 2-step accent 16ths, and then we can click on this button here to get it to commit, and you'll see how the MIDI has changed, and we can see that the MIDI notes have changed in velocity, length, and timing to match the groove. In Logic there is a similar thing, but it's a bit more limited. You just have this swing dial here. What I do like in Logic is that the quantize settings are quickly available and adjustable via this drop-down menu here on the left-hand side. You can also then decide how strong the quantize is, as in how much it's snapping to the desired settings. In Ableton, you do have to do Command-Shift-U to bring that up, and that for me is a step too much for something that I do think should be readily available. So in conclusion, for MIDI, we love the legato function in Ableton as well as the Groove Pool. And in Logic, the ability to access the quantized settings, strength, swing, and velocity all from one panel on the left-hand side. Let's talk samplers. Now, Logic has the quick sampler, and you can drag and drop your sample in just like this. Personally, I feel it's a bit busy, but the functionality of Classic, One Shot, and Slice do come in very handy, and you can very, very quickly change and add transient markers if you need to. I do also quite like the pitch and filter section, which are very easily accessible. Now, Ableton definitely had the producer in mind when creating their sampler. All you have to do is double click on a sample and it will load it automatically into what's called the simpler. Then from here you have access to filters, which you can turn on or off, and you also have access to the pitch in controls if you want to transpose it, just like in the quick sampler. Just like in the Logic sampler, you do have Classic, One Shot, and Slice, But what I like is that initially it has less going on, and then if you want to get a little bit deeper, you can always switch to controls, where you have a little bit more visual aid as to what's going on when you start adjusting different parameters. So a big win for the Ableton sampler here. I do think it's better because it has been around for ages and they have refined it over the years, whereas the quick sampler in Logic just feels like it could be a little smaller, just a little simpler. When it comes to synths and instruments in Ableton, you do have a good selection. My favorite being the Wavetable, which is definitely one of the most inspiring to look at, and it sounds fantastic too. My other favorite is the drum synth, which has these nice little diagrams and easy to dial in sounds. On the other hand, in Logic, you do have a huge selection, but some of these synths have been carried on from Logic 9, maybe even Logic 8, and you can just tell by looking at them and that the design is really old. However, they do sound very good. So on that front, Ableton has got a great selection of synths and instruments, which looks slightly less inspiring if I'm being honest, whereas Logic has a huge range, old and new, which also sound fantastic. Okay, last but not least, effects. But rather than compare, what I want to show you are the effects that I really like in both Ableton and Logic. Logic has this awesome pedal board where you can really quickly add and take away effects to create your own unique chains. Ableton has this LFO Max for Live tool, which you can map to any parameter really quickly and get it to modulate depending on your settings. Logic has one of the cleanest compressors I've ever heard, as well as lots of different circuits available that emulate vintage gear. And Ableton has the echo delay. Now there are hundreds, if not absolutely thousands of features that I could compare Ableton to Logic and Logic to Ableton with. But if you have a moment, comment down below with what your favorite features are from Logic or Ableton and tell us why. So thank you for tuning into Boombox. This is the home of collaboration. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. Peace!